Okay. So during this library workshop series, various librarians put forth ideas they would like to present to the larger community. And I really thought that I would like to have a little demo on what is called Roper iPoll. So I think, why would I want to do that? And one of the reasons is I think it's a library resource that a lot of people don't know about. It's a very specialized resource. It's a database of polling data. It's different than, say, other repositories of data, such as the ICPSR, which is a repository of research data, which does include polls, it sometimes include the same organizations that deposit in Roper, but Roper iPoll is really strictly polling data. So it's kind of like, it's up to, it's not, based on long research studies. It's based on the kinds of polls done by, news organizations and sometimes universities too. But it's a, very unique, that it only specializes on polling. And we might really maybe we'll have kind of some fun when we kind of do some demos of what kinds of polls make it into the Roper iPoll. But even though this is a little known, in my opinion, resource, I have been able to use it for some targeted library instruction with certain assignments. I have found it especially useful for a upper level social work class that I work with, where they have to try to influence, their state legislature with data. And that sometimes includes research articles, census data, but also we've used polling data as well to kind of gauge, attitudes maybe in the community or something like that. So it's a helpful little niche resource that I think is very helpful when someone has to do something that has a persuasive element to it. But also really through those kind of persuasive speech, persuasive, writing kind of assignments, it also is helpful because it actually brings in some visuals that you can insert into those presentations or papers. So it's helpful in that way too. It's helpful with text of the polls, the polling questions, but also some little very easy to use visualization. But also, I think it's also something that I think could be explored as a place to find data sets. Oftentimes, in the ICPSR, a data set that you might sound very interesting, that's all great, but it could have some restricted data, but maybe you really just want the course to learn more about how to manipulate Excel or, work with SPSS. I think this is an idea of a place where you can kind of get a very not as heavy duty research type data set, but a data set nonetheless that doesn't have maybe some restrictions on it. And I just think that's an area that could be explored to mine when you have to find data sets when you're teaching an SPSS course or something like that. So those are the areas where I have been trying to promote iPoll on the campus the most. It's mostly been on, hey, how can you use polling data in your writing or speech assignments, but also then could it be useful as a place to find a data set that a person could then analyze with the statistical tools. So then why the Roper iPoll, and what is it? So it is a database of polling data. I have some history of it here on this slide. It began with the donation of the polling data collection of Elmo Roper, who was a new market researcher. He donated his data collection to Williams College in 1947. And according to at least them, this is the first social science data archive. And they renamed it the Roper Public Opinion Research Center. Now, we have to kind of think back. what did a data archive mean? We think of, this Roper iPoll itself as a data archive. We may know of other data archives, but, in 1947 and 1957, and even in 1977, being a data archive would look very different than it would today. I've been a librarian for 20 years, and using tools mostly have always been web-based tools, but the depositing of data into a data archive 50 years ago was punch cards, various papers, things like that. In fact, at the Roper Center, they need a lot of room for these kinds of things, so even just the dedication of space by the university to maintain a lot of, paper and very early automation of polling data itself. In fact, they really made some argument that the need for something like this was really akin to the need for the kinds of research labs that biology and chemistry have to use. So, but as time has gone on, I think the need for the physical space has really shrunk. But really, when we think that this began 1947, it began in a very different environment than really how we use it today. And then just to make sure we all know that the Roper Center now lives at Cornell University. Okay, so that was what is Roper iPoll, but what is in Roper iPoll? Okay, here are some important polling points. Okay, one of the big reasons why we have the Roper iPoll, why we want to, as a university, pay for this subscription, is it gives us the polling data from most of the Gallup poll and the Pew Research Center. But also, there are also various other smaller polls that are very useful, such as things from the AARP. And you're always seeing CNN polls and ESPN polls and various newspaper polls. You see them out there. Even if you see the results published in newspapers and on those websites, they get a lot of polls from those, more brief polls from them as well. But also there's foundations and think tanks that deposit into the Roper Center. And even a new recent addition, some polls that were done by the game Cards Against Humanity. Their success in selling their game inspired them to do some polls, I guess, to maybe try to improve the questions that they were asking in their game, and they deposited their stuff into the Roper Center as well. So you really never know what you're going to get. All righty. Okay, so now give me a second here. I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a second. I'm going to now get my screen ready to do some demonstration. Okay, you should be seeing the library website, library.wayne.edu, because it's through the library website that we get into stuff that Wayne State's paid for. I will get to Roper iPoll this way.
I just wanted to let you know, Monique, it's coming through just fine.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to click on article databases over here on the library website. And I'm going to search for iPoll. And here it comes up here, Roper iPoll. I'd always just call it iPoll. It's always going to be iPoll to me, because really what I always like is the polls themselves, Although I appreciate, all the effort the Roper Center puts into making this. Okay, so now we are in the Roper iPoll. And in many databases that Wayne State subscribes, whether you're going to do a search in Social Work Abstracts or ProQuest Central, there's usually a feature where you can make an account within the database that is actually separate from the login that would have been required to use, authenticating through Wayne State. And I usually find that creating an account feature within the database is unnecessary, except this is, I think, one of those times where I find that it is very helpful to create an account within once you are logged into Roper iPoll. So here, over on the, I'm already logged in, I already have an account. It says my account, that's me, and we have my folder up here. I do find that it's helpful to save things to the internal folder. Again, I find that to be kind of a pain in databases, but this one, I think it's really worth the time to create that separate account. Okay, so as you saw, there's a wide variety of polls in Roper iPoll. So I'm just going to do a quick search that will help us see the breadth of what's in there, but also see how we can use the search features to narrow and navigate the database. I'm just going to do a search for football. We see a lot on football. I was interested in looking at some polling data in the years past because I have 2 teenagers who do not play football, but have been really involved in youth sports. And I was interested in things about injuries and how people felt about that. And I was doing this search to kind of help lead me to that kind of information in years past. All right, I did a search for football. And that means that somewhere pretty much in the question line, but in some of the abstracting information of where the poll came from, or the results were like, that was an option to choose an answer, football was mentioned. Just a simple keyword search, and it gave us questions 1,489 and data set 609. So that's just kind of remind ourselves, when we do a search for that keyword, iPoll was organized around the question, not necessarily the entire theme of that poll and data set is all about football. So that's the first thing that you see. Okay, so we see some interesting things, all right. You know, very simple. Which of the following is your favorite sport? And football was an option there. Did you ever play sport? Okay, and I am going to just click on the question. And here is the answer to that polling question. Here's the breakdown of the poll here. We can look at the study info with this tab over here on the upper left, study info. And that tells us, you know, information about the poll. IPSOS, I believe, is like a market research kind of a place there. You know, it tells us when it was conducted. National adult, you know, it was a national poll, and the sample size. And this is interesting. This was a web-based survey. Go back to questions. And I can kind of manipulate my screen to look above. Okay, so this is the question they asked, you know, what is your favorite sport? We can look at other questions that were asked in this poll. And this poll really asked a lot, including a big theme was about asking about coffee consumption. So they had a lot of questions about coffee consumption, but they also had questions about what is your favorite sport? I think I'm going to go back again to the study info. And, you know, again, the title of this poll is really just called Understanding Society. It wasn't about, you know, necessarily dedicated to the sporting world. Okay, I'm going to go back and back to my search results. And again, these are the questions that we had about football. The question, the answer, so this is interesting, I guess, when we type in the keyword, what we get, the answer to our keyword search are actually questions. All right, so there's any other interesting questions here? Okay, I think I'm going to do some other searches here. Oh, you know what? Let me demonstrate this at this time. Okay, over here on the left, all we've done is done a search for football. You can navigate iPoll this way though, on the filters. We could only look at questions where football was part of the question. But what I think is one of the nicest things to explore is this feature that is called crosstabs. And if I click on crosstabs, it's going to really narrow my results. So I lost some of the data, the questions that I had during my first results, because they did not have this crosstab feature. And I'll explain what this means here. Okay, so now we see some tabs here, some questions, such as this one. Do you think professional sports leagues such as the NFL should require them to stand for the national anthem? Okay, I could click on this question to see the answer. All right, here was the answer to this question from it was a national poll telephone interview survey. But this question allows me to use this crosstab feature, which means that in this poll, they also asked people these questions about themselves. So now we can say, okay, we saw the breakdown of how many people thought, you should stand or not. But we can also manipulate it with these crosstabs, say, okay, and what is your party ID? And you can see the yes and the no's, and we can see the breakdowns of those people who identified themselves with those parties. And this crosstab is really the same. If crosstab is included, it's the same age, education, gender, ideology, income, party, region, race, ethnicity for each one. Okay, but you can click around for on something like that. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to that. Okay. So I was saying that I think that iPoll can be used kind of in a visual speech or something. And you can do that here. Say, okay, let's say I wanted to use this feature to this polling question. I want to include this. And we have this copy to image here. I click on copy to image, and I can then download this chart as an image. And this has been very helpful, again, as a visual to insert into a paper, a PowerPoint, or something like that. And I feel that it has all of the citation information, so it I don't think a student could pretend they made this poll, this visual on their own, So that's something that I think can be very, very helpful. I'm not sure if this is actually showing. I hope that this pop-up that did show the copy to image is showing up.
Yes, it is, Monique.
Okay. So anyway, look how easy that was. Look how easy it was to kind of add, something like that into the paper. I'm going to just do a couple more searches to kind of demonstrate how we can navigate. We can do a search here on student athletes. We get these questions here. I was looking this over, and I saw this question here that was kind of about religious support or prayer groups. And I was looking at it and I was like, well, what does this have to do with student athletes? But I realized it came up because the word athlete is here listed as an organization that might be some kind of prayer group common on campuses. And then we have the word student here. So if I was to go back over to my keyword search and change and put student athletes in quotation marks, it's not going to change. It doesn't change the results that much, but my switching from just the student and athletes to student athletes as a phrase did take away two of the questions that came up. I'm going to do another search. I'm going to search for public libraries, or, you might have seen that little flash that it didn't seem to like my quotation marks, but actually it does work. Public libraries or public library. Is this mentioned in any of these polls? Alrighty, so kind of a lot. Questions, 596 and 110 data sets. That sounds nice. But let's say, I think if you're going to choose a data set for your class to analyze, I think if it has some questions about libraries, well, I think that would make a great data set. So that's why I did this search. So over on the left-hand side, let's say we really want to look only for data sets. We want a data set, want a nice data set here. I can click on downloadable data sets. And now we're going to see results where there was a question that had to do with public libraries and the whole data set is included. So we see the questions about the libraries come up, and all of these will have a data set that you could download attached. And I do believe this is one of the reasons why you need to have an account created in the iPoll, because I think downloading the data actually is much easier that way. I think it's rather obvious from the visual here, the file formats that you can download in. And I think it's also obvious with the navigation on the left-hand side here. And I think that probably at Wayne State, we're really looking to find data sets that are either CSV or SPSS. So you can narrow down to one of those as well. And then you could have the data set there. Then you would know that all of these would work. And so then the default for anything in iPoll is the newest comes up first, but you could also think about, how could would you like to see some relevancy ranking possibly in this public library thing? All right. Let's take a look here. I'm going to click on the question and explore. Let's see here. Okay, looks like a lot of questions, so there'd be a lot of data that could probably be compared there. Actually, let me go back one more time. Okay, this may actually even be overkill, but you could also include in the search the crosstabs feature. So you would see that those areas of the crosstab, such as gender, income, party affiliation, and things that would also be included in the data set. All right, I'm gonna continue with my demos here. I'm gonna clear, I'm gonna do a new search, and let's do this. Let's look at this feature, the additional search features. This is kind of like advanced search. And in this, let's say we really wanted to say, you know what, I really want to look at Pew. So we kind of saw me, I kind of did the big Pew here, the big one. And let's say in Pew, I want to see, okay, when have you surveyed anyone and asked them about working from home? You know, maybe in the class, people talked about what are good sources, and people said, you know, Pew Research Center is a very good source. Let's have to say if they polled anyone on this topic. All right. And so we get a few, you know, Pew Research conducted April of this year, October 2020. Let's see what would happen if we were to change the search to most relevant. Let's see if there's any change there. Probably, actually, there was probably, this poll was probably dedicated mostly to working from home. Okay, so here's how we could narrow the results to, you know, I really only want to look at Pew, maybe I only really want to look at AARP, things like that. I'm going to go back to additional search features. Something else you could do, you could say, I want to make sure that my poll has residents from Michigan included in the pollees. And I have done this with students before. What sounds like a very broad search we end up getting very little results, but let's type in water. We only get a couple of questions where people in Michigan were asked about water, but here we go. You know, back in March of 2016, this is exit poll data. I know this because I looked at it already today. This was conducted by Edison Research, March 8th of 2016. What date would that be? This is exiting voters, absentee voters in Michigan, you know, people who are leaving the poll, I believe. Oh, or who on that date did it, or I think corresponding, I think, with the primary, did this telephone interview or on-site questionnaire. And here's, you know, the image here. You can see why Michigan showed up here, because this is where the people were. Again, it's things like that that have been very useful when I've worked with the social work class that's really trying to write to their, you know, state representatives and things like that to influence them on a certain area. Other additional search features, some interesting things that Roper iPoll does. On sample types, you have this where you can see where was this a part of the sample? And again, this is kind of the language of the Roper Center, but they have things where even things where, like, you know, were immigrants included in the sample? Here's an interesting one, leaders and elites. Okay, we could say, okay, what does this mean, leaders and elites? And all I did was search for what can you tell me about leaders and elites? I like this one though. Do you ever visit the library with your children? And this poll is kind of on the older side, but certainly I would hope that, you know, people identifying themselves as leaders and elites would be visiting the public library. But you can see, what did that mean, leaders and elites? The sample of the pollees, national adults, including an oversample of civic individuals. Okay, that's what it meant. That's how it got that leaders and elites designation. But I did try, I have been trying, I'm going to go back to new search. I have been trying some other things that I thought were successful with this sample type, you know, like when I looked at immigrants and refugees, for example, as a someone who people identified themselves in that way. when they were being polled. Maybe one last feature when I'm going to go back to my working from home search from all polls. This is just searching the phrase working from home. And, you know, like I was saying, the newest of the results show up first. But what if I wanted to say, hey, when was the first time maybe this phrase was used in the polls, in the polling data that is archived here? And here, you know, from 1997, by the year 2000, do you expect to be fully employed but spending at least one day a week working from home? So, you know, you can kind of look at some older things on that same topic. Well, I am a librarian who tries to use this polling resource, you know, when I can, you know, with students of all levels, to see how they could work something like this in that is, again, informative and persuasive. It's not the kind of stuff that is asked in, like, you know, the Census Bureau surveys and things like that. It's different. So sometimes it kind of helps people answer their questions about, you know, why doesn't the census collect this information? Well, maybe you can look at some polls that might, you know, glean some light on, you know, religion or attitude or something like that. I find it to be helpful as a persuasive tool. And then I think it could really get more use as a place to get data sets if you're teaching data analysis. I think it's a nice alternative that we have beyond other social science research archives, you know, that also have nice data sets. But I think that sometimes this might be a little bit easier to navigate and maybe even more fun for someone. So that would kind of conclude most of the formal presentation. Again, I try to use this, you know, as a teaching tool and with students. I'm not a polling researcher, but again, I'm just trying to promote this resource more heavily to get more heavy use on campus. But I can take any questions, or if anyone has any ideas, I could try to demo a search on something like that. I think I will try to find here, okay, our data providers. This is very visual, but these are, like, you know, looking at some of the data providers that they had. And this is how I learned that Cards Against Humanity seemed to have some kind of affiliation here with Roper iPoll, and it tells a little bit about what they did. Why they did this. Find the polling results that they did. I think I'll take this off the screen though. Try to keep our screen more scholarly looking.
I don't know that it's a question so much, Monique, but I do think this is also a great entree when, you know, students will say, well, I want to kind of research this topic. And right away, kind of in your head, you think to yourself, oh, that's opinion stuff, as opposed to, you know, what we think of as hard data stuff. Well, this is a great way to kind of bring that up and be able to talk about the differences, because you can so easily see the source of it and who they were interviewing. And I really like that aspect of this database, and I haven't thought about that before. That could be really useful.
Yeah, thanks, Karen.
This is Ron. I think this is useful also for graduate students. Graduate students that may be writing a methods exam, for example, in terms of what you, in terms of looking at who's polled. Is it an online survey? Is it a web-based survey? And the type of questions that are asked. So I see this as a valuable tool for graduate students also.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. You are very right. And I think it's, I think it's also a very accessible and easily navigatable database that answers those questions that you were just, those areas that you were just bringing up. The sample size and the, the demographics, even a good place to begin to explore survey construction and,
Yes.
and that, yes. Mhm.
And a good database for faculty members also. I think it's also good for
Sure,
the entire
sure,
community.
absolutely. As someone who isn't doing the research in the polls and really, while I may occasionally download a data set to help somebody, I don't really then take it that far and manipulate it myself, but certainly that is being done. That is being done on campus.
Monique, just to follow up on what Dr. Brown just said, if you click on the Learn item on the top navigation bar, I noticed when I was in here before, there were a lot of really nice resources, including resources you can use in the classroom to discuss like errors that can result from polling or different kinds of population, polling population selections. So there's some really valuable resources there. They've got assignments and things already put together.
Right. That's very nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a plus. So, thank you.
Yeah, and again, like what Veronica was saying, once you are logged in under Learn,
Okay.
that's what it was.
Okay.
And I find that all of the tabs here in Roper very easy to navigate, and the language to explain everything is very, very easy, as
You know what, Monique, I just saw that Cornell Research Tools under the Learn. I've had questions before about that, the Cornell Research Resources. Because they're doing a lot of tools to kind of help students analyze data, make sense of data.
Oh, okay.
Where it might be.
Like a destination that students might go to and
Yeah, to help them really like process information. Okay, now I see this data. What can I do with it? How do I make sense of it? It might be in the student community stuff. I'm not sure. I'll have to look around in there a little more, but that's kind of exciting because I've had questions about those. Okay. Of course, Cornell Research Community. Okay.
You know what? I guess I will put in one more plug, and I didn't. Oh, let me see here. Oopsie. Kind of got away from our interface. During election time, here on campus, any place is often looking for polling about elections, and this is a place to kind of, students may have heard about a poll that was done very recently and could look in here and see, what are some feelings, attitudes about, who's running for president. Do you plan to vote? Things like that.
Great.
If I type in president in the keyword, this is probably one of the main keywords that is going to bring up a giant amount of questions because it's one of the main polling question points. Over 100,000. Okay.
Yes.
But it in fact, here's something that even just done this month. That was deposited here.
Yeah.
But you can really get some very, very current information. Current information that might really be better than doing a Google search for voting poll, and finding results that only from reported on CNN website or something. You could actually probably get maybe a better tool and presentation of that through iPoll here.
Oh, excellent. Wow.
Were there other questions or comments or anything that folks would like Monique to explore a little bit more deeply? All right, well, before everybody leaves, I'm going to ask you if you could please complete our quick survey that we have. I promise it's super fast. I'm just going to drop that in the chat. I want to thank everyone for coming today, and I want to thank Monique very much for facilitating this discussion about Roper iPoll. I agree with you, Monique. I think it's a very underutilized resource, but if more people know about it, so everybody's task that attended is to share with your colleagues and students. So we will not obviously have a workshop next Thursday because it's the Thanksgiving holiday, and I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday. And then our last workshop of the year will be on December 2nd, and that is going to be led by Karen Liston. And that workshop is going to be on WorldCat, exploiting information in the world's libraries. And she's going to show you how to use WorldCat to access library catalogs worldwide, including exploring non-English and multilingual subject headings, as well as how to request materials. So we hope to see you on December 2nd. And thank you all so much for attending today, and have a great holiday.
Thank you.